G'day guys, Nick and Jack here from the Unaffected podcast. Coming up, we have Tobie and Ella Cornelius as they share their story growing up with a mum with multiple sclerosis.
Tune in to hear us talk about what it was like growing up supporting a parent with a disability and their experiences of social perceptions of having a disabled parent.
We also hear the positive lessons that have come with this and their brush with AFL royalty. G'day and welcome. You're listening to The Unaffected, a podcast where we bring you the stories of those affected by a loved one's disability or illness. Brought to you by CareMatch. Search CareMatch on Facebook or visit their Instagram at CareMatch Australia for all your caring needs. My name is Nick and with me as always is Jack, and today we have two special guests in to have a chat with us.
Tobie and Ella, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Tobie and Ella's mum, Kate, has multiple sclerosis or MS. MS is a progressive autoimmune disease in which the body's own immune system targets the covering of nerves known as myelin. This basically interferes with the transmission of nerve signals and impairs the ability for messages to travel between the brain and body. Symptoms are primarily gross movement related but can also affect vision and swallowing. And there's currently no cure for MS, but immunotherapy and physical therapy help slow down the progression and manage the symptoms. Kate first developed symptoms in 2002 while pregnant with youngest daughter Ella, the first symptoms being numbness and decreased function on one of her sides. After 6 years in 2008, Kate received the diagnosis of relapsing remitting MS, which is characterised by periods of stable function interrupted by acute flare-ups or increased symptoms, which are usually followed again by a plateau period. At this time, Ella was 6 and Tobie was 10. She had her first relapse 2 years later in 2010, in which she was hospitalised. At the moment, Kate can walk short distances with a four-wheeled walker, with decreased strength mostly affecting her left leg only and patchy sensation below her thighs. One of the most common and debilitating symptoms of MS that Kate also experiences is chronic fatigue from getting around throughout the day with an inefficient body.
So girls, as Jack touched on, your mum was diagnosed in 2008. Tell us about how old you both were and what your memories of your mum's diagnosis was.
Yeah, so I guess Tobie and I both have different memories or earliest memories of mum's diagnosis. I remember, or my earliest memory is going to Nan's place for a so-called holiday and speaking to mum on the phone while we're there, and she telling us that she's at work and had a good day at work and everything. And then we got back to our house expecting mum to be there, and Nan just said, oh, she's actually at the hospital. And then I just remember Tobie and I breaking down crying. That's probably my earliest memory.
How old would you have been around then?
8.
8. And so what stage of your mum's condition would that have been? How long had she known she had it for then?
That would have been 2 years of knowing. So that was when she first relapsed in 2008. I guess that was more scary for us because we couldn't physically see that mum had a disability. So we just associated hospital with something very bad. And I don't know how much I understood of what was actually going on.
So I think my earliest memory was probably the day that they sat us down and told us that mum has a disease called MS. And I suppose as a kid, you don't really understand, like when you're told, when you hear the word disease, I suppose you think the worst. So I think my first response was, are you going to die? That was like my first question. So I think just from being so young, we didn't really understand, and I think we thought the worst straight away. So I suppose I should preface the fact that we as a family don't really talk about it that much. We haven't really spoken about it with mum that much. I haven't really spoken about it with Ella that much. So you guys listening are probably going to hear some conversations of us that we've never had with each other before. So.
I just wanted to touch on that and say, like, I was speaking to Mum about the moment that she told us, trying to re-jog some memories, and she said that basically she doesn't remember much of that time in her life either, but she remembers telling us and then having the biggest night of her life out on the deck on Hilliana Street and just drinking,
Really?
Dad and her drinking and dancing and playing music so loud, and we were all out there apparently.
Has she said why she doesn't remember much? Was it medications or just a bit of traumatic time that she's blocked out of her mind?
Yeah, I guess I put it down to that, just like trying to forget or suppressed it. Can't remember. I suppose that might be why I can't remember some things either.
I think of all the conversations that you might want to block out of your mind, telling your little girls that you have a condition that you know is going to scare them, as you said, Tobie, would be right up there with one of the ones at the top.
Could not be easy.
As a kid, and from that time, like you said, you were scared, and did this mean that your mum was going to die? What was your understanding of the expectations of a prognosis, and did they explain that well to you?
I suppose I'll go because I do remember the day that they told us. Mum basically just said, I have a disease called MS. It's nothing I think she said something like, it's nothing to worry about. I'm not going to die. We didn't understand it at all. I think MS wasn't as prevalent back then, maybe. I still am only hearing a lot more about MS in other people now. So, but yeah, I personally didn't understand what was going on. I kind of just thought she was going to get really sick and die.
I wouldn't say it wasn't as prevalent. I would just say it was hard to diagnose back then because they didn't have enough information. And that's why Mum wasn't diagnosed till 6 years later.
I think now as well, social media definitely opens up your reach to hear similar stories growing up in small coastal towns. You don't, I suppose, statistically, it's very unlikely that there's going to be too many people around town with MS, but social media, as it's progressed, would open up that opportunity to hear other people's stories too. So it probably seems a lot more prevalent.
As kids growing up, were there things that you guys had to help with that other kids wouldn't have to?
Tobie and I grew up in very different times. Tobie and I's age gap is 4 years. So I would say when Mum's disability started getting to its peak, like really hitting downhill, I would have been about 13 and Tobie would have been 17. And that's when Tobie was out doing teenage stuff, going to parties, focusing on school. So I was always the one at home. I never really went out with friends much. I was always taking Mum shopping, or if we had a birthday or a Christmas coming up, I would be taking her shopping. And then on the other side of it, it would be like when we go shopping, I'm always in the toilet with her, get her to the toilet. If she wets herself, I'll go get her clothes. And I always have to be that second brain for Mum, making sure she's got everything that she needs, her drugs and everything.
Was that something that was just sort of normal to you? Because I guess you wouldn't have known any different.
Yeah, definitely. I saw it more as I got older, like the difference in my life compared to other people's. But yeah, it definitely, I wouldn't think twice about it, and it comes second nature to me now, for sure. Was
it something that you just started doing of your own accord, or did your mum ask you to help out, or was there a conversation around that you'd need to help out?
Well, it actually started with I was Mum's walker until she got a real walker. So she used to hold me by the back of the neck and use me to assist in walking with her. So I was just always there. So that's just how it happened.
I think also it does come second nature because that's your mum and you'll do anything for your mum anyway, whether it's disability related or not. So I think we're always trying to do everything we can to support her. I think definitely there were things that we had to do that a lot of other kids wouldn't have just based on the circumstances. I think that's pretty obvious, but that was our norm. So yeah.
I know you're saying it was your norm, but Ella, you were saying that you started becoming aware in your teenage years of the differences between your upbringing and I suppose your freedom and those of your friends who had parents without MS. Did you ever, I suppose, even though I know you feel like it's your natural obligation because it's your mum, did you ever resent that was your obligation?
Yeah, this is actually a conversation that came up last night. So Tobie was glad that I told her before now, but I definitely resented Tobie in a way when my mind was smaller. So when I was younger, I didn't really understand that Tobie was older and she wasn't around for that. So I was there, I was always home, so that was my job to take on. And I did hold a lot of resentment towards her for that. But now that I'm older and see it from a different perspective, I can understand that that's how it had to be and that's how it was. And that's not Tobie's fault and it's not anyone's fault.
Yeah, I guess looking back, you'd see that any 17-year-old wants to be out with their friends doing those things. And if you were home, then, like you said, it's your mum, you're not going to think twice, you'd do anything for them. But yeah.
Yeah. And just to clarify, that doesn't mean I wasn't ever there.
No, yeah.
It kind of sounds like I was
Yeah,
took every opportunity not to be there, but that's not true at all. I think I personally struggled to find that balance as well, because I think a massive feeling that comes naturally with being the loved one of someone with a disability is feeling a lot of guilt as well. I think we both felt that significantly when we moved out of home. You don't want to feel like you're leaving them behind. So it was, yes, I did live my life as a teenager, but I think I did try to find the balance, and I was definitely there to support Mum and Ella as well, because a lot of people might not know as well that Dad actually worked away. So Dad also wasn't really there either. So that's another reason why we probably had to support a bit more than the average kids as well.
And I think your mum would probably say as well, she would have wanted you to live your life as well. She wouldn't want you to be, have to put anything off more than you need to.
Was there conversations around, like Tobie, I know you moved out when you were 18, right?
I think I was 19.
19.
Around that age, yeah.
Yeah. Relating to the guilt that you feel, did you have conversations with your mum, or did she have to talk you into moving out, or?
Not at all. I think you try and hide it.
Yeah.
I think for me, I tried to act like it was fine. People move out. That's what you do. Don't be upset about it. But yes, obviously I did feel guilty. I think you have to try and understand that as much as you do want to stay there and support them forever and be there for them forever, you also have to live your own life as well. And it took a while for me to accept that as well.
Did Ella come into your mind at all? Did any of that guilt come from a place of knowing
Definitely.
that Ella was there helping out?
Definitely, yeah.
So going at school, you were started to become aware that you had a different upbringing to, I guess, your classmates and your friends. Did you find it difficult to talk to them about it? Did you ever try, or did they ever ask?
I think Tobie and I both experienced similar primary school and high school situations. We were both pretty badly bullied, purely for the fact that we were just too mature for our peers. We just didn't get along with them. We've always had older friends. All my friends are older. Most of Tobie's friends are older too. And we just get along better. We just were too old for the shit that was going on. And yeah, we both suffered for that.
I would say that we didn't necessarily have a different upbringing. I think we just had an upbringing in a different circumstance. I think that kind of parlays into the fact that, yes, it was difficult, and yes, other people had maybe a different circumstance at home and things like that. We were definitely... I think that I grew up the second that we were told Mum has MS. I feel like I had to kind of grow up that second. Yeah. So definitely with that maturity, I also think I found that there was a sense of, because I couldn't fix Mum's situation and fix the fact that she had a disability and a disease, that I kind of attracted people into my life that I wanted to fix. And a lot of people didn't like that. They were like, leave me alone. Like, why are you trying to mother me? Why are you trying to do all this stuff? And I think I didn't really realise that I was doing it, but I definitely think it was an effect of the fact that we were so mature and the fact that I couldn't fix mum, and so I was out there trying to fix everyone else.
I think the moment you're at an age where you can comprehend a condition like MS and you understand the outlook, it's key to survival. Like, your brain has to mature for you to actually be able to deal with that knowledge. I can't imagine it'd be so hard.
There'll almost be a positive to come out of it to mature. There's nothing wrong with maturing quickly, and it's probably helped you develop quicker later in life as well to have that early maturity.
Definitely. I think that the maturity and being able to deal with the situation has made us really strong and able to be really strong through adverse times now. And I think we don't really sweat the small stuff. I think that's a really great positive, but in saying that, it is difficult to kind of sympathise and empathise with people who do sweat the small stuff, especially in, friendships and relationships, and they come to you about their problems, and you kind of like, oh, like, are you serious? But, their stuff is just as significant because, that's what they're going through. But yeah, I think it was difficult to empathise and sympathise with people who didn't have bigger problems, if that makes sense.
I've found that a lot as well. People find it hard to complain to something to me because they're like, oh, it's not as bad as what you're going through. And I think, yeah, everyone's got their own shit going on though. It doesn't matter if it's not as bad. It's still, if it matters to them, it still matters. And yeah, it might not be on the same scale, but yeah, you still got to deal with it, everyone in their own way.
What about your friends at school? Did you find it difficult to talk to them, or did they ask about how your mum was? And
yes, I still find it difficult to talk to people. I think it's hard to try and explain a situation and how you're feeling when they don't really understand. And sometimes it's difficult when you're upset or you're expressing the situation you're going through or how you're feeling, and they come back with their response and it's not exactly what you wanted them to say, and you're like, damn, I just wish you actually understood how I felt and what I'm going through and what I've been through and all this stuff. So I think, when we were younger, yes and no, because I also was quite angry at the situation and at the world when I was younger, when I didn't really understand. So I kind of went to my friends, saying my mum's the worst person in the world, like, being a horrible teenager. And so, but even now, I find it hard to talk to people about the situations.
What about your partner, Matt? Do you talk to him about it? He's, I suppose, part of the family by now after being together so long, but also kind of just outside enough that you might talk to about
I think I do try and talk to him about stuff sometimes. I think because we are so resilient and so strong and that we don't sweat the small stuff, and I feel like also because we're a family who never really spoke about our problems, we do internalize a lot of things. So I do go to Matt for some things, but sometimes it is difficult because, it helps that he's a nurse, so he can kind of...
Has that medical background.
Yeah, he has that understanding, but in terms of, sometimes you just want someone to say exactly what you want them to say when you're upset, and if they don't say that, then it's kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you have any other friends at school or anyone at school that had a disability, or parents or siblings with a disability?
I had one whose dad actually lost both of his legs, but you couldn't really talk to her about it because she never spent much time with him. So after the accident, the parents split, and I suppose because it was when she was younger, she just never formed that relationship with him, so she didn't have much to say about it. But I found that it was already hard enough for me to talk to kids at school as it was, so I didn't really talk to them about it much at all. And growing up towards high school, year 11, year 12, I just learnt to, if people made comments that triggered me or made me annoyed, like during COVID, if they're like, oh, why aren't you on your computer and I ask you to show up to class and all that. Like, I'm busy doing things, helping mum around the house, like during online school. My cat had to go to the vet. I had to take her to the vet because mum can't do that and just pick up her stuff and go like that. So when they say inconsiderate things like that, I don't even bother going, hey, you don't know what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Because there's no point.
Not worth it. Yeah.
I think at that age as well, like you just don't have the mental or emotional intelligence to empathise unless you've been through it yourself. So, like, my sister's got cystic fibrosis. I don't think most of my mates found out until over 18 or well into our 20s, just because, well, for one, it didn't seem like a big issue to me, but I also thought that they wouldn't understand anyway, so it wasn't worth bringing up. That's just a tale of the times at that age, I think.
And I think sometimes you just want a break from all of it. So when you're with your friends, you kind of just want to be with your friends as well. So
Yeah, for sure. That's your, not escape, but your time away from thinking about it.
Yeah.
What about growing up? Did you ever notice people kind of staring, or especially, not to make generalizations, but teenage girls, and being very worried about their social perception and people's perception of them, etc.? Were you self-conscious about being seen with mum?
Yeah, the day mum told me that she was looking at getting a walker was probably the most horrified I've ever been. Just because people associate walkers with old people, straight away I went, Mum, you're not an old person, you're not getting a walker.
Yeah.
Like, you're just not. And I was like, you can use me for as long as you need.
Yeah.
But I came to terms with it. Now I can't picture mum without one.
Yeah.
Like, it's a part of her, it's her legs.
And that's it. Like, you understand now the importance of it. Like you said, it's her legs. So her option outside of that is a wheelchair.
Yeah, exactly.
But as a teenager, you're thinking, oh, I don't care if mum needs that to walk.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be seen with her.
I reckon she was I was 14 when she got one. So grade 8, going through bullying and everything and everything else. And
Tough age.
Yeah, a tough age as it is. And I was just so worried about what people would say. I used to get a lot of bullying in primary school about the way mum walked as it was. Some kid got on his butt and dragged his ass along the ground and told me that's how my mum walked. And when I say I could punch someone in the head right there, I could have done it. But I was worried, but I'm glad that she did it because it's what she had to do and she needs it. And I'm glad she's not in a wheelchair for as long as she can be. So
it's something where you'd think there'd be organisations out there that could go into schools and educate kids. Because like I was saying, it's just at that age, unless you've been through it, you don't have the emotional intelligence to kind of empathise in others' experiences. I feel like early education would be so good to...
I think there is now.
There is?
I'm pretty sure I've seen there is now. People with disabilities going into schools and... Yeah.
I completely agree with that because I know that when I was really young, and I'm talking like really, really, really young, I kind of was afraid of seeing people with disabilities. Personally, for me, people still stare and I'm very protective over my mum, but I do think the lack of education for people is the reason why they stare. And I think I have to kind of just take a step back and remember that they might be staring just because they're curious. It's not really necessarily looking at her in a bad way. And I think also people look at her because she does look normal. She looks like a 40-year-old woman and they're kind of like, why are you in a scooter?
Yeah.
This is not like, and a lot of people do ask as well. They say, have you injured yourself? Have you, what's going on? So I think it's just people's curiosity. And I think I was never personally scared of being seen with her with a walker or with anything like that. But I think I just am really protective over her, especially when people stare. But it's not their fault.
I have little kids look at me and just think it's the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And getting around in a chair. I had one little kid looking at me, he's in a trolley, goes to his mum, I want one of them. And she's like, oh, no, you don't. Don't want one of that shit.
That amazes me that people can be so upfront. Like, what happened to you?
Yeah, we're at HCF and the lady goes, oh, what did you do? How'd you injure yourself? And I'm like...
In the right context, I think it can actually be helpful rather than, because it is so obvious, rather than try to ignore it and beat around the bush. I found sometimes just to address it and make it known this is what you can do or can't do and this is what you need can almost just make it easier.
That's just a big thing of one of my nan's favourite sayings. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. There's a big difference between coming up and saying, what happened to you?
Yeah, exactly.
And someone coming up and saying, oh, do you mind me asking for you, Nick, like, why are you in a wheelchair?
Yeah.
It's completely, just think about how you say it, people.
Yeah. The other thing that I would say is, I don't know about you, Toby, but I didn't know anyone personally in a wheelchair to an extent, like to a great extent, and before I met Mum and before I was exposed to making strides. So I would probably be in the same situation as them if I wasn't exposed to all of this. It just comes with awareness, I think.
Yeah.
You can't really blame people if they haven't been exposed to the things that we've been exposed to.
Yeah, 100%.
And that comes with growing up and understanding and everything else. Like when I was younger, I'd probably be offended, or like when I was bullied, I didn't understand, but now I understand that that's problems within themselves, not actually a problem with me.
Yeah. Just while we're on being self-conscious in social settings, your mum, I hope you don't mind me saying this, Kate, gets a little bit of social anxiety and doesn't like sticking out in the crowd, but she told me a funny story about you and her down the coast the other week and someone offering help that aggravated her a bit. Can you tell us that story? You like this one, Nick?
So Mum and I were actually in Cabarita getting Dad a bike for his birthday, and it was a hectically windy day. Mum wasn't moving well as it is. We were kind of walking up a slope, and when people watch Mum, she just can't walk. She can, but it's very...
She gets really self-conscious.
Yeah, she gets self-conscious. She can't move her legs. And then people stare more because they're like, oh, this poor lady. And so we walked in and this guy watched us the whole way, and we bought the bike and I walked out with the bike and put it in the car, and Mum was slowly making her way to the car, and she could see that this guy with his family was still watching us the whole way, and he was kind of like saying like, should I go or should I go? And then he came over and he's like, oh, can I help you into the car? And Mum was like, no, thank you. And she's like, are you sure? And Mum's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'll get there eventually. And it was Tony Lockett, plugger. And Mum turned around to me and goes, no, but you can get a signature off him for your dad.
What a good bloke. Plugger, if you're listening, mate, well done. Well approached.
Sometimes help is welcomed because sometimes it's really hard for us girls, especially because Dad works so much. If we're taking Mum to the shops and we're trying to get like a 40-kilo scooter out of the car, sometimes help is welcomed in that respect. But I think even family will run over to Mum and try and pull her or try and help, and they think they're helping, and it comes from a good place, but sometimes that's actually worse than just letting her do what she needs to do.
Definitely ask. That's one thing I find. I hate when people just try to jump in and do things. I know they mean well, but I'd rather say, do you want me to do this? Do you want a hand? If I say, no, it's all right, then yeah, nothing wrong with asking, but just definitely ask.
Yeah, well, that's what I found. I had to figure out the fine line between knowing when to help and not when to help, because Mum's not someone who will ever ask for help. And there's times where she's like, oh, why didn't you do this? And I'm like, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do that, but she won't ask.
Yeah.
So growing up, I just had to find my bearings and figure out what she needed to be done without actually talking to her about it, because it comes with her being embarrassed or feeling bad that she has to ask her 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old child to do that. But yeah, I didn't have any problem with doing it because she was my mum and I'd do anything for her, and yeah, it just came as second nature to me.
I think something that frustrates me too is because we know Mum so well and we do know that line between when to help and when not to help. Sometimes people will make a comment and say, why aren't you helping your mum? In a really like rude way, and it's kind of like, because I know Mum can do that and I know that she likes to do that herself. So sometimes it's difficult when people kind of judge us for kind of standing back and just letting Mum do things herself, because they're not in the situation and they don't realise that sometimes people still need their independence, and we do know her well enough to know that line of when to help and when not to help.
100%. I think any condition that affects your independence as an adult, every opportunity you get to still be independent and show that you're still capable, it's all pretty important for the ego, because I don't know, it's probably not well known, but the ego would definitely take a big hit having to receive support and help for things that other people without your disability do.
So we touched on like growing up teenagers being a particular way. Difficult, yes. I mean, we've all had arguments with our parents and we're all dickheads as teenagers. Do you guys ever use your mum's disability and kind of throw it in her face a little bit in the heat of an argument?
I don't think in the heat of an argument. I've definitely probably thrown the comment out there that I'm allowed to have problems as well, because sometimes we can be made to feel like our problems aren't valid in a way, or not so valid but just not as important. And it's already hard enough for us to speak up or tell mum our problems or tell dad our problems, because we're just a family who doesn't speak about our problems. So when it gets dismissed, it's kind of like, well, I have problems too. And I guess, I mean, as a younger kid, I never really said it, but I've spoken to mum about it now, but I'd always used to be like, you'd hear the wooden spoon drawer open and I'd always think, I can outrun you. Right. But I have to eat and I have to sleep at some point, so there's no point in trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely don't think I've ever and wouldn't ever throw that in her face, because, again, that's not something she can control. It's not her fault. I think, I can agree with the fact that I understand. I don't have the best memory, so I'm not 100% sure, but I know that is definitely something you or I both could have said, in terms of that our problems do matter as well. But yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't ever cross that line. Yeah.
When you said that it's not something that your family talks about, your mum's condition, as in it's never come up in conversation at all, not formally, informally?
Not since we were apparently sat down and told about it. We've never spoken about. It's not that we haven't asked. We have asked some questions, but they're touched on lightly if they're ever spoken about. And, you know, I don't know if it's triggering to ask mum how you're feeling, because we know that every day's a struggle no matter what. So we've never really had an in-depth, especially not now when we actually understand what's going on, never really had an in-depth conversation about what's going on, what's happened previously, how her MS has progressed, and what the future's going to look like.
I think also for us, it's definitely something that's it's hard to explain, but we don't see mum as disabled. She's just our mum. The only time I ever look at her and go, oh, okay, you're really sick, is if we go to hospital with her when she's having treatments and chemo and things like that. So I think we don't look at her as disabled, so we don't really we're not really inclined to have those conversations, although I think it would be quite healing for all of us to have those conversations. Ella and I have only recently just started to talk about it, and it has felt really nice to talk to each other about it. But we're not an overly emotional kind of family, so no, we don't really talk about any of that, yeah.
Have either of you seen like a professional for help, as in a psychologist or a counsellor? Were you honest, and did you open up with them about it?
Yeah, so I definitely did. I think it was something for me that I needed to do, to go and speak to someone to deal with it, because, again, we don't really talk about it as a family. So I did do that in school, and I think I was pretty honest and open about it, but I don't know if mum entirely liked the fact that I went to a psychologist, just because sometimes they would tell me things that I would go back and tell her, and she didn't necessarily agree with, which I completely understand. And so sometimes, I think she wasn't too on board with the fact that I did that, but I definitely think it helped me.
I think it'd be confronting for your mum as well, because, again, I hope Kate doesn't mind me saying this, but she's quite conscious of and worried about the impact that her MS has had on you. And so the fact that you're seeing a psychologist, I think, would be confronting for her, because it's going to bring to light that the MS is affecting you enough to need to get that help.
I didn't really see a psychologist specifically for dealing with mum's MS at the start. Mum and I both went to the same psychologist for a different issue. But we ended up talking about, I think as the youngest child, she had a lot of trouble letting go and letting me steer my life in the direction that I wanted it to go.
I think also she was the other way around. You were her biggest support. You guys were like so close with each other. So I think definitely, and I mean, we can't speak on behalf of how mum's felt and what she's dealt with, but I do definitely think that naturally, if you can't control a lot of things in your life that normal people can, maybe that was something that ended up happening simply because she couldn't control a lot of things in her life.
Yeah, I think definitely seeing the counsellor and us going to the same counsellor about the same issue but at different times, so we weren't actually in the same room, it helped me a lot, and I got a bit of my freedom back. And then we started to mend the holes in the wall.
I think definitely in Tobie what you said about how when you can't control a lot of things, the things you can control, you try to. I mean, I can relate to that. Obviously, with the physical disability, a lot of things I can't do. Those things that I can do, you sort of really like to, because you sort of hold on to those things that you can still do, especially whether it is something verbal. Might only be the smallest thing, but whatever you can do, you try to just hold on.
I think even when you get into that stage of your life where both your kids are moving into adulthood, like Remy's only 3 years old, but I already dread the day that she comes home and tells me she's moving out. And I think leading up to that, I might go through the same struggle of trying to control too much while I still can.
Not like mum's been an amazing role model. She's shown us that even on your darkest days, you still get up and you still keep pushing, because that's what you have to do. And she just had to accept that she had the disability, and she does accept that, and she just keeps pushing forward. But yeah, just to shine the light on Dad for a second, he's been, as much as he hasn't been there, he's been there for us through thick and thin. He supports us massively financially. He works ridiculous hours, and he's just shown us what a great man and a great husband and a great dad should be and should look like. And I think that's an amazing thing to have grown up with a role model like that, that we can now know what we deserve.
I think both of them have been amazing role models. I think exactly what you just said about Dad, and then the fact that Mum is such a resilient, strong woman, and she always says you can either lay down and die or you can just get on with it. Like, that's just how she looks at it. And I think, that's her saying. And I think the fact that both of them have just handled the situation so well, I think that's half the reason why we don't feel like Mum's disabled and we don't feel like we have such a hard life, because they have just pushed on and still been our parents and still been amazing. And we, no matter what, Mum has done everything she can to give us everything that we want. And so I think we're extremely, extremely lucky to have both of them.
Shout out to John, because as well as working 70 hours a week, he gets into making strides on his way to work as often as he can. So he gives up probably an extra 2 hours sleep to come in and help out and just watch Kate's rehab session. So
I think probably he wouldn't have the opportunity to do that, to work that amount of hours, if you guys didn't sort of take on what you did. And sort of lucky to have you guys just step up and do what's needed to be done. And I guess you've got a pretty down pat now as a family. Everyone plays their roles, and like you said, it's normal to you guys and it works.
Yeah, I think also I wanted to briefly touch on, while we're talking about making strides and all of us going to watch Mum at Making Strides, on a positive, I suppose, something that I know I personally feel a lot, and I'm sure Dad and Ella both feel it as well, but you feel extremely helpless, that you can't do anything to fix the situation. A lot of the times there's not much we can do. We can do everything we can to help support mum, but at the end of the day, you know, like we can't control what's happening, we can't fix it. So I think the moment we found Making Strides, it was really nice to kind of watch a community of people who are now like our family come together to help her, which made, I know personally, it made me feel a hell of a lot better, because I know that there are people who can help her when I felt for, you know, this entire time so helpless that I couldn't do anything to make, you know, her situation any better.
I think being in a social setting where everyone else is in a similar situation makes the mental game of it a lot easier, because, you know, she goes in there and she sees, as like bad as it is to make a good situation out of a bad situation, she sees people like Nick in a wheelchair pushing himself every day, who's in a worse situation than her. So that's very uplifting to show that she's in a sort of better situation and she can be there and she can fight it. And like if Nick's fighting it and he's like that, then she can just do anything. Like everyone in there believes that they can do anything. And yeah, I just think that, yeah, Making Strides has just been...
Shout out to Making Strides, I love you all.
Promotional.
Yeah. When's the money coming in?
Yeah.
So mums are usually the glue of a family and the main person like kids go to for emotional support. In dealing with her own disability, has your mum still been able to be that strong emotional support?
I think, yeah, definitely. As Tobie and I have said, we don't look at mum as disabled on 90% of the days. So yeah, I think that she's been there for everything that we've needed to go through, whether it was out loud or silently. We even though we don't talk as a family, we all know that we're there for each other no matter what. So it's just not the way that our family rolls speaking about it, but we know that no matter what, we're there for each other.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, of course, she was there for us. She's the best person to go to when you're going through something. I'd lay in my bed crying because I've gone through a breakup or something, and she'd come in the room, right, windows open, blinds are open, get up, get off your ass, let's go. We're going outside. And she's just she's great. She's so great. She's always pushing through everything, and she's always taught us to push through everything. And I think that's why we've been able to handle the whole situation so well as well. So
I can definitely second that she's a good friend, because I went through a pretty tough time at the end of last year, and that's when me and your mum become good friends, and she was one of the faces I looked most forward to seeing in it Making Strides each week. So for me as a friend, she's been a great support even in her situation.
Yeah. I don't think the disability has affected her mothering abilities in any way whatsoever. She's still been able to be the best mother that she could be, and I almost think that it's made her a better mother, because she's been such a role model to us, and in showing us how strong she is and how strong we can be, and that we can do anything and deal with anything that life throws at us.
Has your mum's MS, and I suppose the impact it's had on your life and the lessons you've learnt, sent you down a certain pathway in life, whether it's work or, I know, Ella, you're entering into the disability support work area now?
Yeah, definitely for me it has. I've just joined, got into a traineeship with a place called Project Make Lemonade, and I found that through mum. So the owner of it, Hayley Locke, was originally one of mum's good friends who also has MS, being mum's support coordinator, and I'm now doing a traineeship in disabilities to become a support worker.
Was wanting to help people in similar situations to your mum a motivation behind pursuing that?
Yeah, definitely. Everyone in Project Make Lemonade has a close contact with someone who has a disability. So we're all there because we're affected by it and we're passionate about it.
I think naturally we both would be extremely hesitant to move away like far away from mum. And that's not saying that she'd be holding us back from anything, but that's just the fact that naturally we want to be somewhat as close to her as possible to be there when she needs us or if anything was to go wrong. For me, it's a really tough subject, but I think that as soon as it suits my life to have children, I don't want to wait a really long time because I want her to have the opportunity to be as much as a normal grandparent as she can be.
Mum, if you're listening, Tobie's pregnant.
I'm definitely not pregnant. But what I'm saying is I think it upsets me and it's really unfair that she doesn't get to have a normal, be a normal grandparent, or have a normal experience as a grandparent.
As in fulfill the physical roles of being a grandparent.
Yeah. I think Tobie had a conversation with her recently and she sort of said I still want to be able to look after the kids even if I have to have someone there to help me. And I think that's what touched Tobie's heart.
No, I think also it's hard when your partner, I think it will be hard to watch your partner and their parents be able to have those normal experiences and then my mum not be able to have those normal experiences. So I think as soon as it suits my life and as soon as I'm ready, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm just going to wait to have children. I think I want to do that when I'm ready. Yeah.
She'll have that. She will have that unique opportunity. I see a lot of the clients come through work with young kids and the kids can't wait to get on their laps in their chairs. So I imagine there'll be probably some unique opportunities for to have those little moments where it's the kids on a walker or...
Yeah.
But yeah, I think she's still going to have a very special relationship with the grandkids.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Do you think through the support you've had to give your mum that it's developed a closer or more unique relationship than other people might have with their mum?
I think Tobie and I have two different perspectives on this one. Mum has always been close with us. We've always been close with her. But I think I've developed a more unique bond with her through doing things that a kid who doesn't have a parent with a disability would do. So yeah, I think that's definitely brought us closer. Being around her all the time up until 3 months ago, I moved out of home. I was working nights, so I was with her all day, every day, all weekend, every weekend. So yeah, we definitely had a very uniquely close bond.
Which is even unique because I know personally for me and a lot of my friends, the time in your life where you spend the least amount of time with your parents is pretty much 16 or 17 through to your early mid-20s. So you were spending a lot of time around your mum at that unique time of, I suppose, your maturity as well. Yeah,
exactly. It definitely brought us together, but I mean, we still had our days. That's for sure. We're two Leos, born 2 days apart. So yeah, we were definitely stepping on each other's toes here and there, but we'd always bounce back from that.
Yeah, I think we definitely have a unique situation and a unique relationship. It's probably a more, I wouldn't say intimate, but we do see things that are quite personal for mum that probably other people wouldn't necessarily see. So I understand that it would definitely be more unique of a situation and a relationship, but I just think that my bond would be just as strong either way because I'm going to love her the same either way, I think. But in saying that, we don't really know the other side of it, so I wouldn't really know if my bond with her would be any different. But just from reflecting on it, I don't think it would.
How about, what are your expectations for the future and what does it look like for you all as a family?
I think that's a hard question just because we try and be so positive and live in the moment. So, I mean, I haven't put too much thought into it because obviously the future is going to be different and it's going to be worse, and her MS is progressive, so it's going to get worse over time. So I think that's something that we try not to think about and try not to dream about or imagine, because we don't want to think of something that could be worse or it could be better than we expected. So, yeah.
I definitely agree. I think the future has always been hard to look into when we don't really know what's going to happen. But we're a very each day as it comes type family, and I think at the moment life's really good, and it's so great that although we both live out of home now, Mum is going to see the Strides family every, I think, 2 days a week. So fingers crossed with all of the work that she puts in, and she puts in a lot of work. She is so strong. I think her future, all of our futures right now look pretty good, and I don't think we like to think of it any other way.
I think it's such a good perspective to saying that he's really focused on the now, because the future's going to be different. Like you said, your mum's condition's progressive, so it's going to be more challenging. And I think if you look too far ahead with conditions like this, it can definitely divert your attention from some of the magic happening now. So
out of all the lessons that your mum's MS has given you, what's the biggest take-home message and the one that you'd like to share most with others?
I think I have a very long list of take-home messages and things that I could share with people who may be going through a similar circumstance. I think the biggest thing for me, and if I could say anything to my younger self, it would be that it's okay to feel angry, it's okay to feel frustrated, it's okay to feel guilty, it's okay to feel heartbroken, it's okay to feel all the feelings that you might feel when you don't understand, and now that we do understand. So I think don't ever beat yourself up for the emotions that naturally come when you're in this situation.
Yeah, I just think, you can never blame yourself, and you got to try to not let, in a situation like that where it's not controlled and it was no one's fault, you got to try and not let the person with the disability blame themselves as well. There's been a few times where Mum said, like, sorry, like, this shouldn't be happening to you, and it's like, well, it shouldn't be happening to you.
Yeah.
Like, it's not your fault. Like, don't ever apologise for something that's such an unfortunate circumstance. The biggest take-home message would be that no matter what, you just got to keep trying, and you just got to keep fighting. And I think for Tobie and I, and from the loved one's perspective, I think the biggest take-home message is that you're allowed to feel all the emotions that you feel, and you're allowed to be down, and you're allowed to be sad, and everything that comes with it. But at the end of the day, you just got to look at it that people are in worse situations. And in a way, we're blessed for the situation that we've been put in, because we've grown up to be mature, and we're the people we are because of the situation that we've been, or the cards that we've been dealt. And none of us would be the same people if the situation wasn't the way it is.
I think also maybe from the perspective of someone who's listening who might have a disability, who is listening to hear the perspective of us loved ones, I think we've really been able to deal with everything so much better simply for the fact that Mum handles everything so well, and because she is so resilient and so strong. So I think depending on how you deal with the situation will definitely affect how other people deal with the situation, and everyone deals with everything differently. But I just think we've kind of been able to deal with everything the way we have, and have grown to be the people we are because of the way Mum is so resilient and so strong, and doesn't fall victim to anything, and carries on with life. We have a very normal life. Mum still does everything independently. She's still always doing 35 loads of washing and whatever she's doing. So I think it's kind of,
so pretty much feel all the feels, but just don't ever lay down and die. Keep going.
Exactly.
No point giving up.
Great woman. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in, girls.
Thank
you
you
for taking
Yeah.
the time to chat.
Thanks
Yeah.
for having us.
thank you so much for having us.
Not a problem.
I will third. You're awesome chicks, and I always say to your mum that I like to call you old school, because you just don't see it in this generation of scoundrels. I think it's a combination of your mum and dad's awesome parenting, but also the lessons that you have had to learn from a young age, and how that smoldered is, but you're old school. Well done. That was a good chat there, guys. Some heavy talking points there from Tobie and Ella, as there are going to be most weeks. Beyond Blue have given us the green light to offer their support. So remember, if any of our podcasts stir up any negative emotions and you need support, contact Beyond Blue on 1300 224 636 or go online to beyondblue.org.au and navigate their website to the online chat where they'll be able to direct you to where you can find some support. Remember, it ain't weak to speak.
Very wise words. And coming up next on the podcast, we have Jake Parker coming on to share his experience with us. Jake's mum, Jane, passed away last year after a battle with motor neuron disease. After Jane's diagnosis, Jake became her full-time carer, putting his university and life largely on hold to support his mum through her battle with this devastating condition. So tune in to hear Jake's story, and I think it'll be a very interesting one to get that perspective on another terrible disease, motor neuron disease. But as always, although there's going to be some negatives around it, we bring a positive spin to it, see what he's learned, and some of the life lessons that have come from that.
Don't forget to look us up on socials, guys. You can search for The Unaffected Podcast on Facebook or look us up on Instagram via the unaffected_podcast, where you find the links in our bio to our YouTube and TikTok. You can also reach us via email on theunaffectedpod@gmail.com. So hit us up via any of those links with feedback or questions you'd like us to ask any of the guests that have been on already or Jake coming up, and we'll try and get some answers back to you via our socials.
Thanks again for listening, guys, and tune in next time to listen to Jake.
Cheers.